Certainty Principle by David Light, Chapter 10, Ideas for Identity. Section 10.5, Why Identity? Identity-seeking behaviors result from a reflexive cycle of thought and its related emotion. Emotionally charged thoughts of any kind can evolve into dependency in a similar fashion to the way drugs can elicit an emotional response and become psychologically addictive. The morphine high becomes cognitively connected with the drug, the needle, the fix. Similarly, sadness and melancholy that results from the compulsive victimism of identity reinforces my thinking that I am a victim. That reinforces the sadness, and the brain pushes out the serotonin on that validation. At least I have my misery is not an uncommon response from someone addicted to the victim mentality. I might wonder why one would perpetuate such a cycle. I suggest that the incidence of any emotion reinforces that at least I have an identity, at least I exist, when identity has come to define my existence. In a culture where identity is the primary tool for driving consumption, those lacking enough internal definition are easy targets. Unless the game is recognized for what it is, those who are susceptible absorb such external influences, advertising, media, celebrity, digital media, as important parts of their identity, especially during periods that are economically or politically disruptive. Clinically, this is the definition of the depressive state. Fundamentally, I am desperate for identity in the absence of a logical explanation for my existence. An illusion of experience results that can become so predominant that it is my substitute for real experience. Over time, this habit becomes so compelling that I go to extremes to sustain it. Albeit afflictive, selectively resisting exposure to fact in favor of the safety of an illusion. The brain's existential uncertainty is the motive force behind identity formation. The experience of clinging or attachment to such identity becomes a substitute for the experience of reality with its inherent consequences. The resulting attachment to the thought-emotion loop consumes bandwidth and limits my experience of the actual present. As mentioned above, the distorted isolation tends to prevent me from decisions that are based on fact. Instead, it promotes a cognomotive, thinking emotive loop, shelter that promotes decisions and actions based on emotion rather than reason. Identity is the aggregation of multiple cognitive motive cycles which run into the thousands. These cycles run at various levels of my brain operating system in a similar manner that software runs on a computer. Some loops or threads are small and may be conscious or unconscious, variously surfacing from time to time. Some are very influential, likewise operating at a conscious level or not. The character of these loops may be virtuous, assistive, benign, afflictive, depending on the level and type of impact with which they affect my behavior. But one thing they have in common is this: they consume brain bandwidth, and as such, these aggregate running loops crowd out conscious attention until it is no longer functioning adequately. Reasoning slows in a similar manner as on a computer processor. The reasoning gap between my ability to hear what a person is saying and understand what a person is trying to communicate depends on my ability to neutralize my own cognomotive loops. Emotional intelligence is a function of such brain de-looping. But this isn't the only limitation that's conferred by such loops. Cognitive motive loops insulate me from reality by distorting the lens through which I experience my life. At a minimum, they prejudice my experience, and at worst, they insulate me from experience altogether. Psychosis. Such prejudicial loops are often associated with fear. It isn't the purpose of this work to deeply investigate the nature or relevance of these loops. Rather, the purpose is to implicate them as the primary source of poor judgment. Learning and skill development presumably enable the refinement and elevation of judgment. Egoic loops of all types serve to inhibit judgment, and at the extreme can occlude the capacity for rational judgment altogether. Chronic looping results in depressive personality when the brain bandwidth is consumed by these loops to the point that they become reality. 10.6 Reality shatters identity. Humans can exist in a benign state of chronic CM looping, aka identity. These loops or stories accumulate and reinforce from childhood, compelled by the brain's distorted enthrallment with the accumulation of acknowledgments. They become so reinforced to the point that the loops take on the false perception of reality all their own. In effect, I am in the illusion comprised of my CM loops. I am a vegan. I am a conservative. I am an intellectual. Each of these identities come with adherent set of stories that explain and justify each facet of my identity. But the identity I carry around with me is a synthesis based loosely on past events conflated with justifications based on my fears and aspirations. However, since no illusion can stand up to reality, confrontation with experience incoherent with the illusion can shatter one or more of my brain's stories about itself. A difficult, even painful event, getting fired, divorced, the death of a loved one, or confrontation with one's own death can unravel even the most robust identity. The resulting identity crisis leads, for better or for worse, to the dissolution of the important stories that make up the illusion.